Hi, everyone. Welcome to season 11, the Rabbi Roundup. This is one podcast that I host. There happens to be another podcast that I host, and that was for my old job for Yavne Academy. It was called The Red Hawk's Nest. And on that podcast, I had to interview my boss. Then, after they had me interview my boss, I then had to interview my previous boss because we were going through the legacy of Yavne in 80 years. And then I ended up having both bosses at the same time on the podcast. So talk about nerves. So of course, why would I do that to myself? Who knows? But guess what? Part of the Rabbi Roundup, I have my current boss. I just love bosses, I guess. I love interviewing my bosses. So without further ado, Rabbi Markowitz, could you introduce yourself, where you're from, where are you now? Tell us everything about Rabbi Markowitz.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much. It's really it's a pleasure to be here. I'm from Brooklyn, New York originally, born in Brooklyn. Didn't stay there for too long, and a few years in Staten Island, New York, and then I grew up in East Brunswick, New Jersey, small little town. There were only a few families, maybe 60 religious families there at the time, and the rabbi's house was the synagogue, and everybody knew each other, and it was very, very homey. And then we went on a journey. Got married young and moved to Israel. Moved then to our first job was in UCLA, working in Los Angeles and the broader Southern California area. And then like 17 years ago, 17 years ago, we moved to Clifton, New Jersey. And we've been here since, and started working for AISH on campuses and in the New York area. And now for the last almost 8 years has been with OLAMI, working in the global stage, having a great time traveling around the world. So it's really amazing to be here.
So when Rabbi Markowitz was a little boy, what did you dream about being?
When I was little, I have a very good friend, Nachman Seltzer. He's a very accomplished writer, super talented guy. He's done incredible things. He has a choir. He's written books. I mean, many, many books. I don't know, dozens of books. And he and we were in yeshiva together. And he always makes fun of me because I told him one time this story. So now it's going to be public. So I don't know. But when I was young, I remember being in bed late at night. And writing up the plans for how we were going to go and grow our local chapter of NCSY. And I was young. I was like, I don't know, in 7th grade or something like this. And I had the budget and I had the waiters and what we were going to do at this event. And it was very sweet. And so, from a young age, I had these ideas about different things, that we could do as a Jewish community. At that stage, I didn't see any path. There were no jobs like that. I have it even as an aspirational goal to have that as a job. But from relatively early on, I had a passion for teaching and loved the idea of becoming a teacher and wanted to be a teacher. Probably somewhere in that range. Although being in school, I didn't love school. So, it was kind of funny to me to think about becoming a teacher. But that was kind of what I knew and probably was the closest to an aspirational goal of what I wanted to be when I grow up.
It's funny when you say you didn't like school that much. I find in my travels, I mean, I happen to love school, but not because I was such the perfect student, or I made believe I was the perfect student. That's a better way of putting it. As they say, whatever the terminology today is, back in my day, it was the kiss up. I knew how to balance it all, like be Miss Goody Two Shoes when I needed to be, do the mischievous things when it was okay to do. And it all worked out. I knew the balancing act. But I find those who weren't as successful in the formal education make the best educators in the end. Something about understanding or seeing the bigger picture, or maybe feeling that they have to fill a void that maybe they didn't have and they want to give over. But
great study. I think some of the some of my classmates from elementary school who were the worst students ended up as teachers. And when we look back, we think like, how is that person a teacher? I mean, what, they were the worst possible student. But I wonder if it would be a really interesting study. But I wonder if it's because of my grandfather. I was very close to my grandfather, and he was a teacher for like 50 years. So I think a lot of it came from just my love for him and my adoration for him and wanting, to give in that way. He was so loving. And I saw the way students who had him 20, 30 years earlier would see him on the streets and, Rabbi Davis, oh my gosh, I remember, your class and whatever. So I think that probably had a big impact on my interest in that.
That's so funny that you say that, because I had an aunt who unfortunately just passed away within the past month, a little less than that. She started the Hollywood community. I don't know if I had ever told you that. She started the Young Israel of Hollywood. She was a young mother with 4 boys. Her husband was a doctor, and they moved down. He was going to be a doctor down in Florida in one of the hospitals, and they had a rule that you had to live a certain mile radius from the hospital. So she moved to Hollywood, but there was nothing there. And she had these 4 boys, and she just wanted to give them some sort of Jewish experience. So she found another observant modern family, and the 2 of them got together. I don't know where they got the Sefer Torah from. I guess I have to ask my cousins. And my grandparents would go for Shabbos, and they would get a minyan together, and they would alternate.
Wow.
Going from home to home. These 2 homes would alternate. And then slowly people, there's Shabbos in Hollywood. So more people came. And then more people came. And then the original rabbi, Rabbi Davis, who just recently retired, was the first rabbi of the community. The shul, if you've ever been there on Sterling Road, is in the same location where their first house they rented is the shul. And this all started with my aunt, who was also the principal of the Hebrew Academy in Miami. She was the English principal. And growing up, my father used to always tell me, you remind me so much of my sister, Jessica. You remind me so much of, and so it was like ingrained in me, like it just there's that connector. Yeah. And talk about, I eventually had students that were products of her students. And I remember one time she came up north and she was visiting, and I brought her to school with me because I had a few of those students. I go, oh, this is so-and-so's child. This is so-and-so's child. She's like, oh, she just loved it. She just loved it. And it was really very special to make such an impact on the world into that. I mean, if you go to Hollywood, Florida, it's huge now. But I totally get that a family member really brings that out, and that connection, that you feel that passion. So it came down from somewhere, So when you did NCSY as a young boy, then curious, because I've been on some of these Shabbatons, right? They have these they have these things. Maybe it's like on a Saturday night, or they have people come get up and speak, or when they have whatever it is. Were you one of those people that would get up and do something?
Yeah, I did. I started at a fairly young age speaking there. I found an amazing community in NCSY. I was bullied a lot in elementary school. I had a really, really tough time. We moved from Staten Island when I went into 2nd grade, and we lived in East Brunswick, and then the school was in Edison. So there were very few kids from our area that were even, connected. So like on Shabbos, you couldn't even play with the other kids. We were far, and even in East Brunswick, I was on the wrong side of town. So like we were just very far from everything. And I got into the school, and it was tough. There were cliques already, and it was really, really a lot of many years of really struggling with kids who, probably didn't mean it, in a bad way, but it was nasty. So, there was just a very small circle of people and a lack of a social structure. And when I started going to NCSY events, I was like, oh, there are other people, and you could be friends with other people. And I'm not a loser. I can be friendly with people. And I started going to Shabbatons and finding, hey, there are other people to connect to over there. And it was amazing. I met people from all over, and the school environment stopped bothering me as much. I just didn't need that kind of social proof on a local school level. I had a social structure outside of that. So NCSY was really fantastic in that way. And then when there was an opportunity to kind of get involved in like leadership roles, taking on responsibility in the chapter or at Shabbatons and whatnot, that was a great outlet for me. And I started speaking at Shabbatons and, giving Divrei Torah, which I didn't know how to do, right? But you learn and you get up there and you start stepping up. And it was fantastic. It really was kind of my intro to public speaking and to, developing that confidence. And that was, yeah, it was good. And it had its tricky parts, but it was really good in general.
Wow. So it really helped you in many different aspects. So it was like a coping, healing outlet for you. So,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I remember distinctly, being in seventh grade and somebody coming over to me using my name. Like I remember that thought in my head as a seventh grader where they said my name and I was like, you know my name? I don't even know who you are. How do random people know my name? Right? Like that was a big deal because nobody was friend. Like it was just nobody. There were 20 kids in the class. So like there was no structure to have any other friends if you weren't part of that clique. And all of a sudden I knew a lot of people, right? I was like, I started building a whole social network. And there were hundreds of people that I became friendly with. My closest friends throughout high school and beyond were in a large network of people in NCSY. So that was critically important to building not only coping and healing mechanisms, but also developing the social skills to end up, becoming a healthy adult.
that's unbelievable. And then summers, what'd you do in the summers?
So it's interesting. So I went to camp for many, many summers. My first summer in camp was terrible, like terrible. Here I am, I'm this kid in school having a tough time with social structures. And I went to a camp that was really, unfortunately, just a bad camp. It was poorly run. There were all kinds of bad things happening. Proof to the story is that after that summer, they closed it. The health inspectors closed it down, right? It didn't pass health inspection. It was a bad camp on every level. The nature guy, okay, who was in charge of nature. Just imagine like the days, it's changed a lot, but he slept under me, right? So I was on the top bed and he was below, and he had this big knife, a machete, right? It was huge that he kept next to his bed. Okay. And he told me that if I move too much.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Okay. So you can imagine, here I am. I'm this like sixth grade kid and I'm in the bed and I would sleep on the edge of the bed because it had a metal frame. So I thought that like, that was probably safer. Okay, fine. So there were, I have stories and stories from that summer. It was really terrible. During that summer, my grandfather died.
Oh.
And at the point when it was visiting day, he was really at the end, but my parents didn't want to tell me. I was young. They knew I was going through such a tough time. The last thing they wanted to do was tell me that my grandfather was really, really ill. So whatever happened, I wasn't going home in their books. Like they were like, you're not coming home. And I'm like, I am going home. Like there's nothing to talk about. You need to take me home. And like I laid down on the floor in front of the car. Like, you are taking me home. Okay. They said, all right, let's make a deal. And they started negotiating. They said, all right, we'll go on a family vacation when you come home. I'm like, no. They're like, you can have a family vacation and a basketball hoop. I'm like, no. They said, you wanted a chauffeur. So somehow that was the one that made it work. So that's what happened. I came home. There was a basketball hoop in the front yard. And we went on a family vacation. I didn't get the chauffeur until I got engaged. When I got engaged at my engagement party, my engagement party at the time, they gave me the chauffeur. They said we didn't forget. But when I came home, my father was in Shiva. He had already, my grandfather had passed away. And it was this whole traumatic experience. So it's amazing to think that from that place, the next summer I went to Camp Misora. And had the most amazing summer, the greatest counselor, great friends. I ended up staying in Missouri for 8 summers. I was a camper there for 3 summers. I was a counselor for 3 summers. I was the drama director, and I was the assistant program director in the camp. I really grew a lot in the camp, and I had the best summer. So to think like, you can have a bad summer, and then, it could have thrown in the towel. I ended up becoming the head counselor and program director in a camp called IBA, Israel Basketball Academy. My wife was the girls' head counselor, and we really ran the camp. So it's amazing to think from such a bad summer, you can really become like a lifelong camper. And when we had kids who were homesick, like at the beginning, they were having a tough time. I was like, I'm with you, like we're going to work this out, like whatever it takes, we are going to get through this. Because I so empathized with it and knew how difficult it was. But camp was extraordinarily impactful and a positive experience for me, in coordination with NCSY along. Yeah.
It's so funny when I'm listening to you tell the story, what I'm hearing, you being my boss, I'm like, yes, he made his negotiation skill set back then. Like he didn't take no for an answer. That's it. This guy has it. He has what it takes. Okay. Yep. Somebody says, I want to give you X amount of money. You're like, no, we're going to go further. We're going to keep on going. And, you don't stop until you really reach, where your heights are in your vision, which I think is unbelievable. And I think that would be a great segue to maybe share with everyone, what is your vision? I know some people might have heard from other podcasts that you've been on, but really when you went into this, you said you were in UCLA and then you were at AISH and now you're at OLAMI. What is your vision? Like what drives you every day to get into that office, to have that high level energy that you have? What just wakes up Rabbi Markowitz in the morning besides your alarm?
When I was in high school, NCSY had these great programs where we had an opportunity to teach and to spend weekends with kids who didn't have a background in Judaism. High school kids who were in public school, and we were high school kids. We were all kids. There was one time that I was giving a class. I had to give a class the next morning, and I had no idea. I never did that kind of a thing. I didn't know what to do. And I was at a friend's house sleeping over. Remember, it was Mark Stein's house. Gosh, it's crazy. It all comes back to you. And I'm like, Mark, I don't know what to do. Like, I got to teach this class. I know it's kids, not religious backgrounds. And like, he only had a few books, so like one of the books he had was Roy Kaplan's book on tzitzis. And I was like, okay. I happened to be we were doing like a Torah fair in school, and we were doing a thing with tzitzis. So I had tzitzis with me, like a pair of tzitzis, so I was like, all right, I guess we'll do that, So I took a few ideas from the book and I had the tzitzis, and I went the next day, and there were a group of kids, and I don't know how many of them were interested at all in what I was talking about, but one kid was like, all right, like that's interesting. And I said, listen, if you want, I would give you the pair of tzitzis, just as long as you, number one, don't like throw it in the garbage, right? And number two, that you like, you agree that you'll do something, like, you'll use it in some positive way. So this one boy says to me, all right, I'll do it. I would really like that on one condition. He says, I have a condition back. See, there I go. And now I'm a negotiator every time. But he came back to me and he says, I'll do it if you write down the blessing for me in English, right? Like, so that he can read, because he doesn't know how to read it. So I said, okay. I remember I only had a brown paper bag. So I wrote down the blessing for him on the brown paper bag. And that was that. I gave it to him. So like 2 years later, he comes over to me at a weekend, and he's like, do you remember me? And I was like, looked familiar or whatever. And he's like, remember the tzitzis, the thing, whatever. Anyway, so he ended up going to yeshiva. He switched into a Jewish school, and he told me that he would come home from public school every day and put on the tzitzis. And I was like, that is crazy. Like, I couldn't believe it. And it just kind of really hit me early on in those high school years that there are so many Jewish people out there who just don't have access. And that's not fair. Like, they didn't do anything wrong. They're robbed from a Jewish education, and that's wrong. So who's got the opportunity? Who's got the responsibility to go and share the beauty of Judaism with all of these people who don't have access to it? I thought, it's on us. It's the people who have a Jewish education. Like, we should go and do that. And I remember sharing this with some of my friends and some of the people who were involved in NCSY at the time. And they were like, oh, that's so sweet. You're still naive and idealistic. And I was like, oh, you mean you're jaded and you've given up and you don't care anymore? I'm like, no, I think it's realistic. Like, come on. And from there, I started thinking about, dreaming about a world in which the Jewish people are given access to the beauty of Judaism. And it took a long time to find really Rav Noach Weinberg Zatzal, who was the founder of AISH, and having the opportunity to meet with him and finding who believed in it, who was driven by that dream, who saw the possibility that yes, every Jew can have access to a Jewish education. Like, why not? Why isn't that the goal? And from there, I found a place in AISH that was committed to it, and a whole community of people that believed in it, and a global community of people believed in it. And ultimately, that led me to OLAMI, which is now committed to that on the global level, which I think is awesome. And thereby, I think we've got a big job in front of us, and it's inspiring to me every day to get up and to think about, all right, how do we provide a Jewish education to every Jew in the world in a way that they're going to be interested in it, that they would see the relevance of it, and to the extent that they don't, that's on us. Like, we just didn't find the way to present it to them, to share it with them, and to inspire them so that they would say, hey, you know what? I didn't realize that in my own backyard, my Jewish heritage, the Judaism that I didn't know existed is so beautiful that when they do, it's amazing how much you see the beauty come through and how appreciative they are. So we have a big job in front of us, and it's the greatest job that anybody could ever hope to have.
No, that's great, and I love all your passion, and I love your vision. But have you ever? I'm just curious. Perhaps you're normal and have had a day where you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is so hard." Like you felt like dejected a little bit. A little bit? Ever?
I feel like that every day.
Mm.
I feel like that every day. Um, I think it's hard, and I feel like, dejected. I feel frustrated. Really, almost every day. I
Mm.
every day, but every day, probably most days. Um, I think that if it's not hard, then we're not real with the challenge.
Mm.
It is hard. It is a big challenge, and we are fighting against the tide. And I don't think, I hope, I don't think I remember a day when I thought, that's it, I'm giving up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I've had many days where I thought, this path, this place, this direction, this is not working, and it's not gonna work, and we got to do something different. That happens a lot. Um, but not to give up, not to say like we're not going to get this done. Yeah, that thankfully, I hope never to get there, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Well, it seems from what you've shared that the tools that you've gained as a young boy taught you the resilience, whether it be that summer camp story or the transitioning to the school and then having challenges in school and then finding an outlet in NCSY, where you've rose to each occasion. Like somebody with that story with camp would be like, I'm never going back to camp again. I'm done. I mean, let's talk about children today, right? Children today, like if they right, if they had a bad experience, they'd be like, sorry, I'm not doing that again. Nice try, mom, dad, right? Or whatever, or if they're not doing well in socially in school, they're like, just give up everything. Like, I'm not going to do well. I've had students, it's crazy. When I was teaching the eighth grade, there were kids who didn't get into high school, and you really see a difference between children and what their level of resilience. I had this one girl this year, came to school every day, didn't give up. She still did her homework. She studied for tests. She finally got into high school 2 weeks after graduation. And then I
Mm,
had, some years ago, I had another student. She got into a high school, but not the high school of her choice. She
mm,
sat there in school and she was sulking all the time and she refused to do her work and she had this attitude and she previously she was the best student. And I tried to explain to her, I said, it's raining out for you, but you got umbrellas. There are umbrellas for a reason, and you're doing so well. Don't let this get you, just try to, if you can. But she just didn't have that skill set. So it seems like you were very fortunate wherever it was inner or really something that your parents gave over to you that allows you to be realistic, it seems, and as in which I appreciate that you sharing authentically that every day can be frustrating, but you persevere and you continue and you gotta when you deal with people in this type of profession day in and day out, it could be very challenging. But let's focus on some good. What's your favorite? What's your favorite? That was a nice story that you shared about the tzitzis. You got another one like really that really like blows you away and like, oh, it's like in your back pocket, like, you take it out and you're like, oh, this keeps me going just in case.
It's interesting. I heard one time from somebody who was involved in this type of work for many decades, and he said that in the first I think few weeks or something that he started teaching, somebody who was in like a class or something, was super inspired and went off to learn more about Judaism and ultimately built a beautiful Jewish family and kept in touch with him all the time. And he said that one person, was probably responsible for decades of me teaching and gave me the inspiration. So yeah, there were definitely early on in the days of working in UCLA, there were certain students that were just so inspiring in the way that they connected. There was one guy, Eli Grogan. He's an amazing guy, and he came over to me. We were playing basketball, and he had seen me on campus a few times, and I asked him to get a cup of coffee, and we kept just kind of missing each other. And he said, Rabbi, why don't you come and play ball with us one time? And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm going to go play ball with these UCLA guys, And I saw that I just wasn't getting anywhere. So I'm like, all right, fine. So I laced up, and I go in there, and these guys were dunking over my head. I mean, it was ridiculous. They were being very sweet and kind of like respectful. They would give me a little bounce pass. So I could in the layup, and get a point. But in the middle of the game, he comes over to me and he says, Rabbi, can you help me afterwards after the game with some prayers that I could say for my dad? I'm like, yeah, sure. So there was another guy who was there, a friend of his, Dan, and I went over to Dan on the side and I'm like, Dan, what's the deal? Eli's asked for prayers, like not particularly prayer oriented. So he said, Rabbi, it's bad. It's like a bad situation. So Eli and I went through a whole journey of talking about like what is prayer and what's going on and what's happening. And his father, it's a whole story, but his father had a miraculous recovery. I mean, really miraculous. It was like overnight, the whole thing turned around. And he called me up one day and he says, Rabbi, listen, I got it. It was a miracle. Okay. God bless. It's amazing. Whatever. I'm inspired. I feel connected to God. It's wonderful. He says, but I know this whole inspiration thing, it's going to go out the window. So what do I do? I'm feeling the inspiration right now, but I see even within a few days, I already feel like, we saved my father, thanks very much. And I'm going back to my old ways. I don't want that to happen. What do I do? I was so blown away. I was like, wow, what a guy, like how many times we get inspired and we allow that inspiration just to go away. And when they say, from our students, we learn the most, he was amazing. So we had a whole conversation about it. And one of the things I said is like, continue to pray, pray in that way, talk to God and say, listen, I don't want to lose this. I feel a connection, but like, help me out. So he calls me up the next week. He says, Rabbi, you're never going to believe this. He says, I met a girl. I said, okay, you met a girl. He said, yeah, but she's like religious. So now in UCLA, there weren't that many religious students. So all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, time out. I'm like, Eli, who's the girl that you met? He goes, yeah, I met a girl. Her name is Brianna. I'm like, oh, no. No, Brianna's a good girl. Like, you stay away from Brianna. I don't want you anywhere near Brianna. Like, she's great. She's really inspired. You're like a wonderful guy, but like, stay far away from her. He says, no, Rabbi, I'm telling you, this is legit. I'm like, how do you know it's legit? He goes, I saw her across the classroom. I saw she was really pretty. And, we made eye contact and I drew a smiley face on my leg. He was wearing shorts. It's UCLA. And he draws a smiley face on his leg. And like that worked. And I'm like, this is all bad. I'm like, every part of this is bad. He goes, no, Rabbi, I'm telling you, this is for real. I'm going to go, I believe in this girl. She's the real deal. I'm going to be serious for her. I was like, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. We had a lot of conversations. He says, Rabbi, I'm telling you, this is the one that God sent me. Well, many, many years later, they live in Israel. They have a whole bunch of kids. They have a beautiful family. And he did. He really, he got the message that God was there for him. And he took it seriously. And in those moments, we realize, we are able to play a role, to be there as a connector, to help people have access. Eli was looking for what's the path forward. And he was searching. He was so inspired. He was searching to pray for his father, and then he was searching how to keep the inspiration. So for me, the student stories of growth, of where students kind of built beautiful Jewish homes, it's because we gain so much from those stories when we can kind of gain from how inspiring the students are, how much they've grown, how much they took on, how much they took up the opportunity. To me, that's the thing that keeps me going, every day, just seeing how inspiring they are.
So now if you would come across some Joe Schmo, religious Jew, what would you say to them? I know we have our mentorship program. If anybody ever wants to know more about that, you could contact me or Rabbi Markowitz through OLAMI. Not a problem. We could tell you all about our mentorship program. But let's say you just meet somebody and you want to tell them you're a religious Jew. What's the best way? Because you just spoke about we're connectors. How would you advise the layman that is not trained in kiruv per se to have an open conversation? Let's say at work, you're there at work and all of a sudden they find out one of their coworkers is Jewish, but no signs of any observance. How do you think they should go about that? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing about being trained in kiruv, it's really about being a loving, caring person. Yeah. So if it's somebody at work or somebody you have a relationship with, there's no magic here. It's like our children. You don't push a button and then all of a sudden they care about God or Judaism or learning or whatnot. It's nurturing, it's caring, it's loving, it's being connected in a real way. So if there's somebody at work and you have a relationship with them and you talk to them and you care about them, so naturally you'll also share about your experiences. And if you had an amazing Shabbos at home and you share that, that's great. And if you had a wonderful holiday that you shared, if it was Pesach or if it was Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, and that's happening, that's also beautiful. And it's great to be able to connect and to ask open-ended questions like, so what was your Jewish background like? And understand and listen and be caring in that way. And see if a person's interested in learning more or experiencing something, be a connector. Be a connector either by, if the opportunity is appropriate to study something with them, or to be a connector to give them access to the amazing opportunities that exist at every corner of the Jewish world today. There are trips and there are weekends and I just saw now, Project Inspire has a new trip for women, I think to Puerto Rico. Come on. Whatever you want. Like there's learning opportunities and experience opportunities at every corner. All you have to do is a simple Google search, right? And you will find things. And if you don't find them, then reach out to us and we're happy to be helpful in connecting the connectors. But that comes from caring. If you really care about the person and you just listen to what it is that they're looking for, that they're interested in, then you may have the opportunity and the great merit of being a connector for that person. And that's really awesome.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think that's a beautiful way to end here. If there's anything else that you felt like, okay, I wanted to share that you didn't get to share, is there anything else that you wanted to put out there before we say goodbye?
This is wonderful. And it's amazing to think about being inspired. Yeah. Being an inspired person to always continue growing, that we as people who, are blessed to have, at least for me, a Jewish education and a Jewish home and loving Jewish parents who are supportive in that way, should see the opportunity to grow in our own lives and to continue to grow and to continue to share that beauty. And that's the most, emanating love and inspiration that's going to come across. So that's I think the unique opportunity that we have today is to take the beauty of Judaism and recognize it for ourselves, and then allow that to just spill over to everyone around us. And hopefully that'll continue to inspire the world.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Markowitz, for
It's been a
taking the
pleasure.
time. I know for a fact you're busy. So, so I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, good, right? Good.